said something about me saying the date was right, I was available that day, and I was like, well, I actually didn't. But then I just said,
All right.
it's not worth it.
Close enough.
All right.
She said it again.
I'd like to call the special City Council meeting to order. So tonight what we're going to be discussing is ranked choice voting. What we'll do is I'm going to have a presentation by Mr. Holdaway and friends. We'll have about 15 minutes for that. And then I would like to have some comments from our county elections officer, yes, thank you, who is Brian McKenzie. And then after that, we'll have public comments and then a discussion by the council. All right. Okay, so Mr. Holdaway.
Thank you, Mayor Witt. First of all, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. Certainly want to respect your time. Just by way of introduction, my name is Corey Holdaway. I became acquainted with ranked choice voting as an elected official when I was in the Utah legislature. Salt Lake County, the Salt Lake County Republican Party used ranked choice voting as part of the selection of candidates going forward. That was my first exposure to it. And then subsequent to that, I left the legislature, and now I liked it then, and I like it even more. I think this is something that is critical for it. There is nothing more important nor more sacred than those that or the right to exercise the right to vote and the elections, at least in my opinion, as far as government goes. The ability to be able to choose who our leaders are and the ability to have a input with regard to the elections as far as voting goes I don't see as anything more important as far as the republic goes. And if you look at history, we've seen a decline in years and decades to the point that people become apathetic and say, why do I even vote? Why go to the ballot box? My vote doesn't count. You often hear those phrases. What I see ranked choice voting doing is re-energizing the electorate, giving them a greater voice, giving them more reason to participate in our republic. Because absent that participation, our republic dies, and we no longer continue to be a republic. So that's kind of my passion and why I'm involved with this and have been involved with this. Joining me at the table is just for more information than anything else. Josh is the deputy clerk for Utah County. Utah County has got a city that is interested in doing this, has signed up with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and they are down the road a little ways as far as getting this going. So he's here mainly for information in terms of what Utah County is doing. And then we can get more into that. Let me just start out by how ranked choice voting came forward. In 2018, House Bill 35 was introduced by two representatives. And the two representatives are Mark Roberts, who's about as far right on the political spectrum as you can get, and Representative Rebecca Chavez-Houck, who is about as far left on the political spectrum. So you've got these two people proposing ranked choice voting as a new way to do elections. And what they did is they created a pilot program that in 2018, House Bill 35 was passed. It created a pilot program that runs through 2026. And then there's some things that allows you to, you can opt into it. You need to opt into it, which partly is why we're here today, because it just gives the requirements as far as procedures go. Just a little more information. As I said, Representative Roberts was the primary sponsor. It was co-sponsored by Representative Chavez-Houck, The Senate floor sponsor was Senator Howard Stevenson, who's head of the Taxpayers Association. He's no longer in the Senate anymore. He retired last year. But it had bipartisan support across the spectrum. Not only that, it had broad support in the body. You can see the vote there: 64 yes, 2 no, and then 22 yes, and 0 concurred with an amendment that was made in the Senate, 67-3. So very minimal opposition to the pilot program being created. So my point in this is that the legislature is interested in this for a couple of reasons. One is the re-energizing of the electorate, but also as a pilot to be able to get information from the cities as to whether or not this would be something that we should adopt across the state for statewide elections as well. In 2019, there was a bill introduced by Representative Roberts to make some amendments. It was House, and again, Representative Roberts carried the bill. It was sponsored by Senator McKay, and again, overwhelming support just in this past legislative session. 68 in the House, 26 in the Senate, and ultimately the body is very interested in this. Let me just talk for a minute a little bit about the benefits of ranked choice voting. And these are in order of, as I see it, as importance. The first one is being the benefit of ranked choice voting is greater voter engagement and participation. And I want to talk about this in terms of a couple of different things. One is in a ranked choice voting election, it's about issues more about party because you'll be able to rank your candidates. It doesn't matter really necessarily who they are. If I like Mayor Witt and I like Councilman Garn, but I like Mayor Witt a little bit better, they're running for the same office, I'll rank Mayor Witt, then Councilman Garn.
I'm not offended.
I'm sorry?
He's not offended.
So, in addition to that, the campaigns are more issue-based. They're about the ideas rather than the personalities of the individuals. Voters become, because of that, you're avoiding a primary election and then a general election. It's one election. Most people, if you go to your neighbors and you say, when is the election? They're going to say sometime in November. They don't even, I mean, the primary elections are kind of an afterthought. Only the most ardent are the members that go to or show up for the primary elections. And I'll get more into that in terms of Kaysville specific as far as data goes. Because you've got fewer people selecting who is going to be going on a general election. So ballot, I mean, it could be as few as 10 or 20% of the electorate selecting who is going to be the candidates going forward. And so in a general election, that percentage goes up, in some cases double. I already talked a little bit about more civil campaigns. In addition to that, for the city's sake, because you're only having one election, there's a cost savings. You don't have to pay for a primary, and running one election cuts it in half. Now, there would be some additional cost initially for educating the electorate as to a new process as far as ranked choice voting, but not anywhere near the cost that it would cost to run an election. Let me go to the next slide. So this is how it works. You can see here you've got a sample ballot, and we'll just say U.S. Senator going down. And you've got five people. The electorate, or the person in the ballot, at the ballot box, is asked to rank in order and then select their second choice and then select their third choice. It's just a matter of filling out bubble sheets. And in fact, I've got a sample one that Utah County put together. If I could just pass that out to you. This is just kind of a fun one as far as the galactic ballot.
We've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, all right. Well, I better hurry.
Yeah.
Going too slow. So I'm going to skip this. This is a sample of a ballot. And then this is kind of how it works. You can kind of see the ranking and in order. I won't spend a lot of time on this. If you filled out the ballots or bubble sheets, you pretty well know how it will go. This goes back to my initial point. In a primary election in 2011, you had 12% of the electorate selecting who was going to be on the general ballot. And then at the general municipal election, you had 27% of the people showing up. And this isn't unique. I mean, in some cases, this is a lot better than some places. But if you look at that and you say, this is a problem, because we don't have enough people engaged. We don't have enough people showing up at the ballot box. You can see the other percentages going down. In 2015, you see a bump up in the primary election, the mail-in ballots starting to go forward, which was a plus because we had more people participating. And then 2017, you got 36%, and again, 40, what is it, a little, almost 50%. So I think that illustrates the point in terms of why a general election and one election is important. Implementing ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting, there is some challenges because we have not done it here in Utah before, but the challenges aren't going to be difficult to overcome. And in fact, my understanding is Davis County has this need to get a module that would be part of the ranked choice voting and activating that module as far as the ES&S equipment goes. And Mr. McKenzie, maybe I'll have some more information about that when he has some time. That talks a little bit about the modules. I know I'm running out of time. I'm trying to talk fast. It also complements vote by mail. It's a matter of just more participation and going forward. This also going back to that, ranked choice voting is something that has been tried in numerous places across the country, and in fact the military as well. Implementing ranked choice voting, this kind of gives you a couple of ideas in terms of how you could do some voter education, some inserts as far as the water bill inserts or things like that, civic club participations. I know Utah County, and Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in Utah County as far as education?
Yeah, we're going to be putting together a voter outreach engagement education project to help the citizens in those cities that have opted into ranked choice voting, to kind of orient them about what ranked choice voting is, how it works, kind of preparing those voters to participate in a ranked choice vote. Right now we've got tonight, Vineyard is discussing it, and we're anticipating that they're going to opt in. There's still a few more cities that haven't yet met and still have time to opt in. But we're anticipating those two cities for right now that we'll be supporting.
So the next steps, in order for this to happen, there's, and I know I'm out of time, for Kaysville to participate, you've got to notify the Lieutenant Governor by April the 15th. And the only reason that is because of the new legislation. Prior to that, the opt-in was December 31st. The new legislation gave us an extension, thus the April 15th deadline. And then in that notice year, and then that's signed by the election officer. I'm assuming it would be your city recorder, who's your election officer. They would need to sign off and say that the municipality would be able to get this to happen, or have the capability to see it go forward. With that, I feel like I'm kind of throwing it out at you very quickly. If you're not familiar with it, I've got a video. It's a 2-minute video.
Let's play it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's going to work. Let's see here. Come here. Oh yeah. Close all my windows. It's a YouTube video. I apologize. Oh, there it is. That's it.
As Americans, one way we express our Use your microphone.
We can hear.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Or, Shane, do you want to get the mic from the podium and set it? Oh, it's, I was, sorry.
Let's see, go back to the start. You're seeing on my interest there with the four-wheelers.
I think it's coming from the projector.
That's what-
Yeah.
And outcomes that don't reflect what most voters want.
Come closer to me, sir.
Ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting. Voters participate in a single, high turnout election. Real choices, where candidates need to reach out to more voters to win. So, when you go to vote for mayor, you're not limited to just one candidate. You gain the power to rank as many candidates as you want.
Is the projector? It's okay.
Well, by the time we get it
Yeah.
gone, it'll be over.
Yeah.
I think it's reiterating what you were saying, though. We can hear it a little bit.
Yeah, so basically, there are a number of videos that cities have done where this has been implemented in other places. Minneapolis has a great one that illustrates how ranked choice voting. There's a Libby for mayor that has a great video as well. She basically walks through the process whereby ranked choice voting works. So
Yeah.
with that, I'm done.
Just one question. One thing to ask you is explaining just how it works. You know, you take the person with the very most, at 50% or more, and then how the votes are divvied out after that. Can you explain that process?
Yes, thank you for that question. So if the five of you were for the same office and we were to have ranked choice voting, then the electorate would then go in and be able to select 1 through 5 as their choices, their first, second, third. If one of you were to get 50% on the first round of balloting, the election's over. There's no need to count any other ballots. However, if nobody hits the 50% threshold, then it would go to a second round, and whoever was the lowest would be dropped off the ballot, or would be eliminated, not dropped off, would be eliminated, and then their second choice, they chose as their second, would then go to the other 4, and then if you hit 50% on that time, then the election's over, and the person is named. In the event that you still don't, then you drop off the lowest again, and then their second choice goes into the ballot, and I mean it just works up through that way.
And if their second choice was somebody who was already deleted, then it goes to their third choice?
Then it goes to their third choice.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Mayor. So it would go to their third choice.
Okay.
So, and again, the videos that they have on this are very out.
Okay, thank you.
And so just as a follow-up question, so if the 6 of us were running for not just one seat, if there were like in local elections where there's 3 open seats, let's say, the same process is followed, first seat, second seat, and then third seat?
I'm going to let Josh, because this is a very issue that the Utah County is dealing with, so I'm going to let Josh kind of go through this.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few cities where the council members are elected at large. So the entire city is essentially the same district, and you have multiple members in that district. And so in a multi-member district race, you have to elect multiple people. And so once you've elected the first, you run the process again after eliminating from the running the person who won, and then you find the second winner, and then the third winner, and so forth. So you basically are electing in sequence multiple winners, and you would basically treat the first winner as if they were a loser, because now you've elected them, so they're no longer an option, and then you run it again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think we'll have more questions in a minute. Mr. McKenzie, can you come up to the podium and explain the county's position?
Thank you, Mayor Witt. I appreciate this opportunity to come and talk with the council. I was contacted by Maria from your city, had some questions where Kaysville has approved an interlocal agreement to contract with the county to provide election services. She had some questions of where we were with ranked choice voting. We indicated to her that that's not a service that the county can provide, and I was subsequently asked if I could come and help explain why that was, where we were on that. So it's important to understand as it relates to municipal elections, the county is a service provider. We have no authority to tell the city what they can or can't do. But as a service provider, we can only offer what we can do. We are going to tell you that I can do something if I can't do it. I'm going to tell you what I can do, and that's what I'm going to sell to you. And so that's what we're doing with what we have in our current agreement with the city. As it relates to this pilot project, one of the requirements that was pointed out in the presentation is the municipality that wishes to participate in this pilot project does need to provide a written statement to the Lieutenant Governor's office indicating and stating that the municipality has the resources and capability necessary to participate in the pilot project. As your service provider, Davis County cannot provide that surety for the following reasons. Number one is the software. It was touched on briefly in the presentation. Recently purchased and implemented last year from ES&S. We do know that there is a software package that can be purchased for $10,000 that we could implement and use for ranked choice voting. As far as we know, as of right now, that software package does not work for multi-winner candidates or multi-winner races, such as your city council. So there's that concern. The other concern is the software is currently not certified, meaning that it has not been independently tested and certified. I just spoke with our sales rep with ES&S just prior to this meeting, finding out where ES&S is in that process. They anticipate their plan is to will be certified by this fall, but it's unknown. Our feeling and our position is that it would be completely irresponsible to use a non-certified software in tabulating election results. Now, the law that was passed this most recent legislative session makes an exclusion that we can use non-certified software, but Davis County will not. The second reason that we have of why we cannot or will not provide this service is, number two, is confusing and delayed election results. I'm really grateful that they talked about how those different counting methods would be used in the different versions or the different rounds of voting. From what we results on election night, and really would not be able to provide meaningful results until the canvass, which is about 2 weeks later. So we have some concerns with that. We're uncomfortable with that concept and not sure how we would get around that. Number three has to do with the auditability of the election results themselves. Unknown to a lot of our regular citizens, there's two primary audits that take place as we are prior to the election. It's the logic and accuracy test. This is when we're testing all of the equipment that we're using, making sure that it's tabulating correctly. But the second one is the post-election test. Now, that's not always required for city elections, but it's one of the most important audits that we do because we take a random sample of ballots and then we compare what was actually marked on the ballot by the voter and compare it to the electronic tabulation. We have no clue how that would work with ranked choice voting because those ballots would have a first choice, and we'd have to identify which actual vote was counted. Was it the voter's first choice that was counted to a voter or to a candidate? Was it the second choice? Was it the third choice, etc.? That we can do that. The fourth point that we'd like to share with you has to do with the voter confusion and potential disenfranchisement. The voter confusion, clearly because ranked choice voting is a brand new concept. And we realize that with sufficient funding and public outreach, we can help people understand how ranked choice voting works, and we can probably overcome many of those. But our concern with that is that the voting method will not be consistent. As election officials, we have worked diligently to make elections as consistent as possible, meaning that our citizens in Davis County know every election they will receive a ballot 3 weeks before the election. Every election, our citizens know where their places know that by filling in the dot next to the candidate, that is their vote. The concern with going back and forth with a ranked choice voting option for a city election versus not on the general election is that potential confusion and ongoing confusion that may be generated. This last point has to do with potential disenfranchisement. As we look at ballots, instructions, complexity, all of those type of things, we know the more complex a ballot is and the more detailed the instructions are, the more difficult it is for voters to vote who suffer from any kind of cognitive disability or limitations, as well as our voters for whom English is their second language. We need to make sure that those reasons Davis County cannot provide election services for a ranked choice voting option. With that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Okay. What we'll do is, if we can reserve the right to ask you questions in
Absolutely.
a minute, that'd be great. But I think I want to go to public comment.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think the first person I have signed up is Lynn Galbraith.
Be careful navigating that lane.
I'm really good at falling down, let me tell you. Mayor and council, appreciate this opportunity to express my opinion on this ranked choice voting. I have to admit I am quite ignorant about it, okay? The first indication I even knew there was going to be a meeting was when my wife looked on Facebook about this meeting. And then the explanation, I have never heard anything about this before. I don't think I'm atypical of Kaysville citizens. We're largely in the dark about the whole process. And is it true on the 5th? Is that true?
Yes.
I see, and I have a big problem with that. This is a major change in the way we vote. And I don't understand why the haste in getting this done. We need time to think about this. You need time to talk to the citizens of Kaysville. And by all rights, you should have sent out something in the newsletter explaining it and the pros and the cons. And then this meeting. And I personally believe it should go on the ballot. And why I believe that is because you disenfranchise me as a citizen by not giving me the opportunity to vote the way I have always voted. Primaries, yes, the lack of voter turnout, but it doesn't preclude the fact that there's a lot of campaigning and people who don't vote see the campaigning, see the signs, and they are involved in it if they don't get out to vote. The second thing is that it's an asset to those who campaign. I know of at least 2 mayoral candidates who did not get the top votes in the primary election. It alerted them to the fact that they needed to get out there and really, get into the woods and really beat the tracks to get the people notified about their candidacy, and both of them won election. Both of them are, I'm opposed to this, and my final statement is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Lynn.
you.
All right. Emily Walsh.
Thank you. Let me adjust that. As was said, my name is Emily Walsh, and I am a resident of Kaysville. I also happen to be a voting rights advocate, sorry, that was a slip, in Davis County as well as in Utah, up at our Capitol Hill. So I'm very familiar with ranked choice voting, which makes me an unusual resident, perhaps. I did a study in 2017 during that summer and fall on ranked choice voting. I'm very familiar. I did do a little bit of a gut check when it went, oh, my vote. And I have to say, I am comfortable with ranked choice voting and my vote. Our city council has out of any government entity, has the largest impact on our day-to-day lives. And as a voting advocate, I know that. I know how important this is. This is a big deal. A lot of people don't know that you really are the most important entity in their daily life, which is why the voting numbers look the way they do, right? Ranked choice voting, theoretically, is absolutely fair, and it is there are questions about the voting systems and the voting equipment, and those do need to be answered and resolved. Was that SES, I think was what it was. If that can, Okay, if that can get certification, this would be absolutely fabulous, in my opinion. So thank you for doing this tonight. I know you have meetings that are other commitments as far as your roles on City Council, and this was one more thing for you to do. And also thank you to everyone who came. Voter participation is really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Susan Lee, please.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I am Susan Lee, and I just recently learned about this meeting, and so quickly put together some thoughts that I had on it. First of all, voters today know the consequences of their vote when they vote. Ranked choice voting is actually like a shot in the dark. First, they believe that it will change voter behavior and make us all get along better politically with one another. Second, those who were involved in an actual mock trial of this kind of an election said that they acknowledged it was, but something else, it can be more expensive. I know they talked about it, the cost would be less, but it can be more expensive. And one of the things about this is that the person who ends up with the most votes doesn't always win, and that's what I don't like about it. It's so simple. If we just stick to what we have done, why are we always trying to change it, mix it up? You know, it's kind of in the atmosphere of this day and age, change the rules if it's not working for them, so they think. People who don't participate in like the primary elections are doing so by choice. It doesn't matter if we change it and do this like we're going to get more participation in our elections. If people want to participate, they will. If they don't, it's because they don't want to. So no matter what you do, it's not going to change what the participation is like. Something else that really, I think that we have to look at is when people make their vote in a ranked choice voting system, if they decide, I'm not going to fill out all the bubbles because I'm very confident that my person's going to win. Let's say they don't win and they go to the second choice vote. Those votes will be tossed out. It's as if they didn't even participate in the voting process. And that is something that is very concerning because if you participate, your vote should count. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy Van Bosse, please.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Randy Van Bosse. Just a couple thoughts on this. As I was listening to the Government Operations Committee hearing when the amendment was passed, there was also a part of the amendment that allows for opt-out. Now, I don't know the specifications on that, and perhaps we can get clarification on that later. But I wanted to point out that that is part of the amendment, is that there is still an opt-out option. So even if we opt out on April 15th, I would like to know if there is still the possibility of getting a month down the road and saying, you know what, it really is not going to be feasible for Kaysville and opting back out. I think that's something that we need answered. I appreciate Mr. McKenzie coming and speaking. I have the utmost respect for him. I'm kind of an election nerd, and I go down during elections and watch the ballots being counted and the process that has been put into place here from all over the state. Come and see what Brian has put into place because it is so phenomenal. I understand the concerns of not being able to give certainty, but I also feel a little disheartened because we do have brilliant minds in Davis County that can figure these things out. I see a legitimate need for ranked choice voting. I understand the mentality of why would we change? We're always looking for a new solution. I earnestly feel that we have reached a crossroads in politics where people check themselves out. We are not the same society we were 30 years ago when a simple majority worked. We are a month. In order to engage the average voter in generations to come, we have to start looking for changes that are going to keep government from becoming just a bureaucracy that nobody pays attention to. And this is an excellent way to start that process, but somebody has to start it. And it might be rough, and we might not get results for 2 weeks after the election, but we're grown-ups, we can suck it up. So I know that there are concerns, but I would urge you not to write off the possibility just because of the complications. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Charles von Bosse. Or as I know you, CJ, right?
I know my wife is more involved in politics than I am. I'm actually very passionate about the idea of ranked choice voting, maybe even more so than my wife. The comment earlier was that if it's not broke, then don't fix it. Our politics is broken. Anybody under 40 has never voted for a United States congressman who has passed a budget on time. Like, my lifetime, my voting lifetime, that has never happened. And I'm not young anymore. Things need to change. And I think that this is an excellent first step. I think that where we are now, and I would be proud to have our city be part of the first people taking a step in that direction. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I want to bring out a couple of points before we start our general discussion. Not to be Debbie Downer. However, I'm glad that we are able to discuss this. However, it is our policy as a city council to discuss things in public meetings, not have time to have another meeting to discuss this again. And this is a special meeting that we've called at a different time, a different day, and that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want our people to think that something hinky's going on here. So I have a concern about that, and I'd be glad to listen to what council members have to say. So I personally would not feel comfortable voting on this tonight, and I'm just putting that out there. Second thing, this year is for our staff. We are renovating this building. In August, we are moving everybody over to the police station. So we are going to be having city council meetings throughout the community. And added on top of that, it's an election year, right? And 4 seats are up. We have a lot going on. And to throw one more thing into the mix for our residents, if we want this to succeed, I want to get a really good run at it, and I want to do it in the best possible circumstances. So don't have our best efforts behind it, then our residents are going to have a negative experience with it. So I have real concerns, and I just want you to understand that. However, it's worth looking into no matter what. One thing, you've buried the lead on this, because if we did ranked choice voting, I think the date to register is like August, isn't it? Am I?
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
new legislation.
Yeah. That cuts out the whole summer of campaigning. That sounds awesome.
It
telling
does
ya.
change the,
Yeah. So to me,
you don't
that-
have all the signs in the
I
in the
know.
city. It's
So, like I
okay,
say, you're
I'm
bearing the
down.
lead.
Enjoy your summer.
All right. And most
Could I-
people aren't even paying attention until after the kids are back in school anyway. So, yes, you had a comment.
If I could just respond to a couple of points that that Brian brought up, and I first of all, again, thank you for taking the time tonight. And with what you said, Mayor, I totally understand where you're at. We don't want something hinky to happen. This has got to be something that the citizens kind of get behind and are enthusiastic about. Otherwise, it defeats the whole purpose of voter participation as far as that goes. A couple of points that he made with regard to the the equipment. The certification for the equipment is in the process. We anticipate that being approved. So I don't see that as necessarily a holdup, but again, today I can't say that it's done, but I think it's going to happen in fairly short order. The other point related to the time that it takes from election day to the actual knowing who and who's going to be elected. I don't see that as any necessarily anything different than congressional district this past election. I mean, it was 2-3 weeks before we knew Ben McAdams was our new congressman from the 3rd district. So I don't see that as.
And that was Utah County.
Well, okay, but
4th district, actually. But.
There's a new sheriff in town in Utah County, by the way.
Never run elections before. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. All right. Council comments. Councilmember DeCare, please.
I've done a lot of research on this. I've looked at this in a lot of different ways, under a lot of different lights. My sentiment about it, I think ranked choice voting has its place. I think it could be a good product. It's not vetted. It hasn't been deployed here yet in Utah.
Right.
It's essentially in its beta form, or it's kind of conceptual at this point. I feel, as a councilman, to vote forward with this, to pass this and to make this our new vehicle of elections moving forward, would be a very good, in good faith and in good honor, do that. This has not been brought before the public. Kaysville City residents are exceptionally in tune with what's going on here. Kaysville is a very politicized city. There's been no mention of this at all. I mean, hell, me as a councilman just found out about this a couple of weeks ago. So I just don't feel that 5 days out from having to make a decision is in good order at all. And I could go on and on and on, but in the interest of time and stuff, I mean, people that know me know I am very just with where I'm at with this, and I'll leave comments for everyone else. So thank you.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, I know that, 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, when I ran, one of the biggest issues that we had in Kaysville that people were kind of upset about is they felt like we didn't have transparency in our government. That was a big, big issue. And I know that since then, I think the city and the council has really worked hard to try to get that confidence of the people, and a pretty good job on trying to, to vet everything that we do, to get people involved. I mean, we've started committees, we've done a lot of open houses and, reach out to people. This is, right now, this just has a bad taste because we haven't done those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And the thing that concerns me is if we ever had a glitch and we approve this and, being the first time you do something, it would leave a bad taste for a lot of people in this city. And I don't want that because in a lot of ways, I actually agree with the process with this. And I think it's good. I guess it's just like when I was a young man, I remember buying a first-year car. And we had nothing but trouble with that thing. And I remember my dad coming to me and he says, well, that's your problem. You never buy a car the first year. They'll find out all these issues, then they fix them, then you're safe to buy them after that. And I think that's probably a way of looking at this. Let Utah County have the issues if they want to, and we can take a look at that. And, and we don't want to have Davis County. And I guess that's kind of where I stand on this as well. And we have time. I mean, I don't think we need to be jumping. We can take and see how things work out, because I don't think that there's a greater fundamental right in our democracy is to vote.
Absolutely.
And I would feel terrible if the people lost confidence in our system.
Amen.
So,
Okay.
Could I just interject here, Mayor?
Okay.
Thank you. 2026, this is a pilot through 2026, and who knows beyond that. I mean, the legislature may extend it, who knows, they do funny things. But you're absolutely right. 2019 is the first year, 2021. If this was something that, as a council, you felt like you'd like to further explore, to put out there to the citizens and maybe put together a committee and explore this in terms of making it more robust as far as inclusion. I think I personally, as somebody that's trying to promote this, would see that as a positive. So,
thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Garn.
I was going to say, what's not to like about ranked choice voting? And I just realized when I got this sample ballot that I could run for president of the galaxy against Jabba the Hutt. So what's not
Winner,
to like about that?
right there.
But I like the idea of it, just the conceptual idea of it, and I in Utah, and it does seem to have several advantages, but I share the sentiments that have already been spoken that we don't want to be on the bleeding edge of the technology either, and we don't really have time to vet it maybe and get that done. But I did have a question. So if we delay and then decide to do this at some point later, you mentioned that the pilot program goes for a number of years. We would still have the opportunity to take advantage of the legislation that the state passed and join the pilot program.
Yes.
For example, I think it would be reasonable to work through a lot of these issues, but 2 years from then, that's quite a bit of time, and we could certainly fully
let me just speak to that if I could, Mayor. Is that all right?
Are you finished?
I am.
Okay. Yes.
Initially, we had 6 cities declare their interest in doing ranked choice voting leading up to this 2019 session. We've had 3 of those reconsider for a few different reasons. One is just the time and the education they felt like they needed to be able to put it out there. The other in Salt Lake County doesn't have the equipment, appropriate equipment. It's older equipment. They'd have to upgrade their equipment. There are cities in Salt Lake County that were interested in looking at this. But speaking to 2021 or 2023, that would certainly be within allowed within the pilot going forward. So,
thank you.
Very good. All right. Councilmember Barber?
Yes, thank you all for coming. It took a lot of interest for several years in this process of ranked choice voting. I've got to echo a lot of people that say we've had frustrations in the voting process, locally and nationally at the state level. And anytime that you can see a process that has the opportunity, we are so excited by it. And I've seen this process work. I've been familiar with it for quite a while. And I have followed the process. I've made mistakes along the way. And I, more than anything, want to express gratitude that everyone was willing to take this huge step forward to even hold a special meeting to give something this much attention. That is to be commended on the city level, and especially to have our county come and represent, and for us to share our expression of interest. That really means a lot. So thank you to the mayor for allowing this. Thank you for everyone to come. It took a lot of courage to ask for something such a big ask in the city. So I'm really motivated by it. The program seems like the right thing to do. It doesn't seem like the right thing to put it through a big swath through the whole state, but we need good data. We need to know that one of the concerns people keep telling me is we don't know if this will work. It hasn't been tested, it hasn't been proven. To which I say, well, how will we find that out? We have to find a way. So I completely support this pilot program, and I will be so interested to see how it goes. One of my questions that, Josh, if you're able to answer, is about the security and the software that Utah County will be using so we can anticipate that data.
So we're using ES&S preferred vendor for election systems.
Okay.
And we followed the example of what I think is one of the best, if not the best, elections office in the state, which is Davis County, who advised us that ES&S was great.
Not just because we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Not just because we're sitting here. Yeah, to be honest, so we're new. I'm new, and I work for our county clerk. I'm the deputy, you know, a lot like Brian and and Curtis Koch. We look to them as an example and follow a lot of the things that they do. So we have a lot of respect for them. So we're using ES&S for our equipment. What happens with ranked choice voting is we use the same scanners, and those scanners are set up to scan all of the various ballots that we've programmed for this. And you get results, the data file of results. So in a traditional election, it might have candidate A, B, C, and D, and it would tell you the total number of votes. A, B, C, and D, the total number of votes for each of the candidates. The data file for a ranked choice would just have the candidates, it would actually have a log of every vote. So you would have a big data file where you would have vote 1. It's not identified with a voter's name or number, but just vote 1, first choice candidate A, second choice candidate B, and so forth. And then vote 2 and vote 3. So you have a giant data file that has that data. So what we will be doing is we'll take that data file, we'll take the actual match paper ballots to that data file as a manual hand audit to ensure that the data file matches on a sort of an audit level the actual ballots that are cast. Now that data file is run through a software module that automates the ranked choice tabulation process. That plugin right now, actually there's an open source plugin that is free to use that we're planning on using. And that software package is being submitted by ES&S this year for what's called voter system laboratory testing, or VISTL testing. Lieutenant Governor will permit or certify, if you will, a voting system that is either certified by an entity called EAC, which is a federal and national entity, or a system that has been tested by a laboratory. Or in the case of the ranked choice pilot, there is an exception where for the ranked choice pilot, if there's a software that hasn't gone through that process, you can use that too. But what we're anticipating is ES&S will submit that software this summer for testing. It'll be tested, and so by the time we run it, the exception won't really apply. We'll just use that software. So that's kind of what we're planning to do with the software and what we're planning to do from an audit perspective. And then as a backup, when it comes to ranked choice voting, and I've done that, I've also been involved in the Republican Party and been involved in ranked choice voting, and so we can also do that. That's kind of what we're planning.
One last question. As I was reading through the legislation, it looks like their exemption with allowing you to use non-secure software stood out to me, but it always had that backup. It sounded like if it was non-secure, they required you had a second way of verifying. Is that right?
Yeah, and to be honest, not every state in America has a requirement about EAC certification. So EAC certification is something new in the last, I want to say maybe 10 to 12 years, kind of on the heels of the 2000 election, very controversial. Actually only applies to equipment. So this tabulation software, that doesn't really fit under the umbrella of EAC. So then the next step would be, okay, well, what about this independent laboratory testing? And so that's where they're submitting the software to, is this independent laboratory testing. But there's many other states that don't have that requirement. They use vendors for their voting systems that may or may not have jumped through those hoops. So in the case of Maine, they use ES&S in Maine for their ranked choice. They used the ES&S tabulator in Maine, which wasn't certified or what have you. And so our logic was, well, okay, if it's good, it kind of pilot or test.
Thank you. Okay. Just my final thought is, again, my gratitude for everyone coming out. I think it would be fantastic to be part of this pilot. I think it is a great thing for the city. I also am in full support of making sure our citizens have time to vet this process. So thank you all.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Adams.
Quick question, just to clear it, it's Josh, right? So Josh, like it was stated tonight, if somebody were to just say, fill out column number 1 with their top pick, is that ballot immediately discarded?
No. all the ballots can be counted, all the rankings that have been marked can be counted. Got 10 candidates, I can rank them 1 through 10, and I'm just picking one and I'm ranking them 1. Then that goes in as a first place vote for that candidate, and that's that. And now if that candidate doesn't win and that candidate is eliminated and there's no second place vote that was cast by that voter, then that ballot is considered an exhausted ballot, so that's set aside in a sense because that voter chose not to cast any additional votes for additional preferences. So in the ranked choice voting lingo of how you count those ballots, that's considered an exhausted ballot, not a spoiled ballot. It's still counted for that first choice. Now in a similar kind of circumstance where you say, okay, this is my first choice, and I don't have a second choice, but third choice is basically counted as if it was a second choice. So it's still not a spoiled ballot. If you have a first choice, and then you have a second choice, and then you have 2 third choices. Well, your first choice is counted, and your second choice is counted, and your third choice is, well, that's spoiled. So your third choice doesn't get counted because you chose 2 third choice candidates, which you can't do. So generally speaking, there's only a few circumstances that would spoil the vote. There's a lot of circumstances that might be odd that are still evidentiary of that voter's intent to say a first choice, a second choice, or a first choice and a fourth choice, and you skipped second and third. So you can still get a lot of those voters' votes counted despite even some what might seem like an error. It won't result in a spoiled ballot.
If I could interject as well, where this has been tried in other parts of the country, there's been no evidence that ranked choice voting elections has a higher degree of spoiled ballots, or I mean, it's no different than a regular election in terms of the percentage of spoiled ballots.
Huh, thank you. Well, quite an algorithm, obviously, that has to go into place. In some of my studies leading up for this meeting, and by the way, I also add my thanks for everyone to be here on whatever side of the coin that we might land on, one way or another entirely either. But I did come across an article that Maine is in some legal battles, that those might be resolved or they might be ongoing. I can't completely speak to that, didn't have enough time to completely study it out. But there are some legal battles that have come up against this in Maine. So obviously there are concerns, which kind of is the nature of anything. But for me, as a representative of the people, I echo other comments that have been shared. I would be in support of this being placed on the ballot. We are in an election year. I don't think I would stand in the way of it being placed on the ballot for the people to vote on it, where this is affecting something that is such at the core of who we are as Americans. I can take a stand on that for the people. You know, I would be supportive again of the people, you know, having it placed on the ballot. But
in some of the cities that have shown greater interest, what we're hoping to be able to do is provide some type of survey or some type of poll for those citizens to just basically inform them as if around the ranked choice voting procedures, and basically just to kind of put it out there as something that the city may be considering going forward. And that would be something that we would be happy to help with.
That would be good. And I do want to point out that there is a member of our council who was chosen by ranked choice voting, and that is Councilman DeCare.
I was.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have employed it in a very
limited scope.
Yes.
Right.
Well, there were like 12.
There were
12 people.
14 people.
So,
right.
4 voters. Right. That's right. So.
Can I have one more comment?
Yes, you may.
Are you
Go
done,
ahead.
Dave? Or Councilman Adams? One last thing. I think it's probably safe to say that over the past few election cycles across the nation, it's nothing short of a circus and a fiasco. It's chaos. And in the way that I've looked at this, and again, I mean, I am a proponent for this. I mean, I do like the idea of it. I do think that it can be executed, but just after it's fully vetted and after the public gets a chance to say. But I guess in closing, what I would really hate to see, and to kind of echo what Councilmember Page said, the last thing that I think that we need in Kaysville is for Kaysville to be the epicenter of some kind of election fiasco, and and have to deal with the fallout from that. I mean, I can applaud that Utah County's stepping up to the plate and, and going to kind of see where all this sifts out, but I don't feel as though shoving this down the throat of the public right here in Kaysville in 5 days, to make this happen is not the right way to go. So
All right.
that's it.
Well, in light of the fact that I don't think we're going to move forward with this, I don't think we'll ask anybody to make a motion or anything like that. But again, really appreciate the information that's been presented to us, both Mr. Holdaway, Mr. McKenzie, and look forward to talking about this some more as we go forward. All right.
Just, sorry, before you.
Just one more thing.
She's got the gavel.
Just one more thing. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, this wasn't a comment on the substance, so I think I'm in
Okay.
agreement with the gist of what you're saying. But I do think there was interest on the council and perhaps a majority of the council to pursue it in the future. So I don't know if we want to just have that as like an informal intent and maybe not put a date to it. But
I think our staff has heard,
Yeah,
and,
I think we're good.
and our community is here, and I don't think this is going to drop.
It's on the ballot? Is that?
I have not researched that.
No,
No.
it's
No.
not really.
No.
Okay.
I mean, this is something elected representatives decide on, is how, that's one of our functions, is we represent.
With public participation, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But to that point, is it doable, Brian? Could this be an item on a ballot? Where the people could say, yeah, we want this or we don't. Thanks,
Sure.
Brian.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Interesting.
that's something. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
almost made it under an hour. Thanks.
5 minutes.